Hello guys, welcome back. It's illogical as always, and it is time for our tier list. Long story short, we've covered all of the weapons. There's 9 Greatswords in the game, and we've covered them all at this point in time. It could change whenever DLC comes out or they release new weapons. We shall never know. On that there, these weapons were all taken on a 40-40 build. So they were at level 125, so it's a quality build, so we can use. This is sort of a general idea of how they would perform. Obviously, a specialist build in any one of these weapons would outperform a quality build. We kind of already figured that. But in taking that information, we can at least use the information that we have gathered throughout the 9 videos that we have made and actually construct a general tier list for them. And hopefully everything goes to plan and hopefully everything turns out quite right. So I guess it's time we got into it with our first weapon. And the first weapon we're going to be covering is probably the one weapon everybody's most familiar with, the Bloodhounds Fang. So on our build, which is 40-40, our damage one-handed comes up to 687, as well as two-handed it comes up to 739. So it does, making it, as far as I'm aware, at this current moment in time, the strongest pure physical damage curved greatsword. So it is. Its scaling comes at a C and a B, C in strength and a D in dexterity, meaning that it does lean more on the dexterity than the strength, but the strength is still good, as whenever you're two-handed you get that extra strength scaling. So you do, as a nice bonus point, it comes with 55 points of bleed buildup, so it does, meaning that you can occasionally proc a bleed. Other than that, there, what's unique about the weapon, it does have a standard weapon moveset for their class. There is nothing particularly unique with the moveset, but what is purely unique about the weapon is its weapon art, Hunter's Finesse. This weapon art hits for some very serious damage, as well as it is a good evasion technique as well. Plus, you can play solid mind games around it. Only problem with it being is the fact that it can be very easily parried, and the reason why that is because it is a very overused weapon from the early game to end game, as it can carry you pretty much through it. So yes, people are aware of the weapon art, but if you learn how to play around it and their keenness to parry it, you should pretty much be fine. So, taking everything that we've just said into account about the Bloodhounds Fang, I have to straight up say that it is an S tier weapon. It completely and utterly dominates the damage tables against every other weapon on this list. So it does, bar possibly three. But all that there, we're going to be covering them in time to come. But as it sits right now, it is definitely an S tier weapon. The next weapon is one weapon that I personally haven't seen at all in PvP, and that there would be the Beastman's Cleaver. Now, I during the Bloodhound segment, I did say this is this is one of the weapons that I was referencing, that on a special build, I'm nearly sure that this weapon could possibly, I say possibly, outclass the Bloodhound's Fang, if I get English, the Bloodhound's Fang in raw AR. This weapon does naturally come, as far as I'm aware, with an A scaling at level 25, but we've converted it to quality, which is a BB scaling. Now, one-handed, this weapon comes with a 619 AR, and two-handed, it comes with a 678 AR. There's nothing particularly magical to say about it, bar it is also the heaviest, or one of the heaviest, of the curved great swords. It is literally just a big slab of stone that you're winging at someone. Again, it is an all weapon that just has the standard curved greatsword moveset, and I have called it here the swap weapon art, as in it can be fitted with your own personal weapon arts, the ones that you prefer. So it does come with a great deal of versatility, but at the same time comes with that one major downside, which is horribly countered by the Great Jar's arsenal, which basically makes the weight of most things redundant. But in saying that, though, this is the one weapon. This is technically, in terms of raw damage, the second most powerful of the curved greatswords, and probably more than likely on a pure strength build, it would probably surpass the Bloodhounds Fang. So, taking everything I've said into account about the Beastman's Cleaver, I would comfortably place it in A tier. It is, by no stretch of the imagination, it is a contender for S tier, but considering how it sits right now, it's going to be an A tier. It is still very usable and it is still very powerful. It just cannot compare to the raw damage output that the Bloodhounds Fang can put out. So it can't. So A tier is where it sits. So next up we have one of the more common weapons, which would be the Dismounter. Not you won't see it very much in PvP due to the fact that as it sits, it is completely and utterly outclassed. It is basically just a lighter, weaker version of the Beastman's Cleaver. So it is. Its one-handed damage comes up to 596, and its two-handed damage comes in at 653 with a BB scaling, standard quality scaling. It has a standard moveset as in saying that there it also has the same swap weapon art, so it does. Now, again, this could be one of those scenarios where a different build could possibly potentially make it a little bit better, as it does naturally come with a CD scaling in strength and dexterity, so it is by natural case more of a strength weapon. So possibly putting it on a more strength oriented character could probably give it a little bit more potential, but as it sits, it is, long story short, a lighter, weaker version of the Beastman's Cleaver. So taking everything that I've said, I have to begrudgingly putting it into B tier. It is a standard weapon. There's nothing particularly special about it or anything that particularly makes it stand out, so it has to be beer, as the two weapons above it just simply outclass it. So now we have the potentially highest, it's the highest paper damage sword of the curved Greatswords. It's the Magma Wire Skill Sword. Scale Sword. Jesus, English. On the other hand, its damage is 557 one-handed, which is basically out damaging every other single weapon two-handed, and 819 two-handed. It basically means it's the strongest weapon. But it's split damage. That's not raw physical damage. That's split damage between physical and fire damage. Now, considering it has fire damage, it means it has faith scaling or strength scaling as well, come to think of it. But the scaling for this weapon is B in strength, D in dexterity, and B in faith. Clearly, we have minimal faith, so you could this weapon could potentially be pushed over 1,000 AR in a duel off raw stats alone. Other than that, there it does have a standard curved greatsword moveset with a unique heavy attack, basically the guillotine moveset from the Omen Cleaver, as well as a unique weapon art, the Magma guillotine, which if it hits for like a truck. In fairness, I think on my build I've hit for about 700 to 800. I'm pretty sure on a build that actually can make use of the faith scaling and the strength scaling, might I add. I'm pretty sure it could probably hit for a whole lot more. But in saying that, there it is also the second heaviest of the curved great swords, which means that you are going to need the Great Jar's arsenal to be able to wield it successfully. So you will. But on there, it is the highest damage weapon, and we still can't bypass that fact. So simply because we can't just ignore that kind of damage, we do have to put it into A tier. It hits like a truck. It may be split damage, but with its standard move set and its unique weapon art, it has damage to dish out. So it does. Yes, there are a few things that hold it back from being S tier, but it still has that insane damage output. If it was made on the correct build, it could very well be S tier. Very, very easily S tier with how strong it is. So next up is another weapon that I have never seen in PvP bar me using it. It is the Monk's Flame Blade, which requires a good bit to farm, might I add. But this weapon is potentially, and I hate to say it, one of the actual weakest of the curved great swords. So it is. I actually hate to say it. So I do. It has 583 one-handed with a damage of 640 two-handed. So it does. It comes with scaling of BB on a quality setting, standard moveset, and it's a swap. It's a swap weapon art. It's just basically, and I hate to say it, a carbon copy of the the Beastman's Cleaver. Now, here's where, even though I'm saying this here, that it's all very quite negative, yes, the Monk's Flame Blade, before quality infusing, is a dexterity weapon. It comes with a D in strength and a C in dex, which potentially means that it is far better suited to a pure dexterity build than it is a quality build. This is going to be one of these things that we keep running into, so it is, and it is somewhat unfortunate that this is the case. But in saying that, there, it is still an weapon that is wholly outclassified. Like, just it's even outclassed by the Dismounter, and the Dismounter is outclassed by the Bloodhounds Fang and the Beastman's Cleaver. So we immediately know where it's going at that point. So until the weapon is tested on a pure dexterity build, we're going to have to do the one thing we have to and stick it right next to the Dismounter. It's outclassed by the Dismounter, but the Dismounter's in that particular sort of position where if it was on a strength build, has the potential to be better. But the Flame Blade's in that position as well, where if it was on a dexterity build, it would be in the same position. The problem is those two weapons are still outclassed by the two weapons in A tier. It's just they can't win. Set them side by side, and statistically, it's just not going to work for them. Now moving on to what I would consider my favorite weapon in the curved greatsword setup, and that there's Morgott's cursed sword. This weapon is a beast, but let me explain why it's a beast. Its damage is 567 and 581 two-handed, 567 one-handed if you didn't know. But the thing is, though, this actually makes it the actual weakest weapon of the curved greatswords. This is, in terms of raw paper damage, AR numbers, this is actually the weakest of the curved greatswords. Now, saying that there, it does have an arcane requirement of 17, so of course you're going to have to make a little bit of leeway room. It scales D in strength, B in dexterity, and D in arcane. This means that to get this weapon perfectly situated, you need to work it around. This is a weapon that would require a special build to make it perform as well as it can. It does come with the standard curved greatsword moveset, but this is why I hold this weapon in such high regards. It's weapon art. Its weapon art hits so hard, it's not even funny. So it is. And on top of that, they're not even taking this into account. It did get buffed. Even before the buff, it was broken. This weapon is criminally underrated, and I never see it in the game. I never see it in PvP. And just to add injury to insult, it comes with a 62 points bleed for bleed build up, as well as a 110 in critical damage, which means if you score a parry, this weapon is going to turn around and chunk your opponent. This weapon is so close to God tier, it's unreal. I'm nearly sure of it, that if this weapon was put on a build specifically used to use it, it would completely mop the floor with every other curved greatsword in this game so far. So with that amount of praise, there's going to be absolutely zero surprise whenever it gets yeeted straight into S tier. Even though it is the weakest, it's that weapon art. That weapon art, as well as its supporting stats, just make it so unnecessarily strong, so it does. And they buffed it. What were they thinking whenever they buffed it? That's absolutely ludicrous. I know the weapon didn't get used an awful lot, but that is absolutely ludicrous. And the next weapon we have is another one. It is the actual Omen Cleaver, wielded by the Omens. Possibly one of the other weapons that I did quite enjoy leveling and using. But again, it suffers from the same stigma as the Monk's Flame Blade, as well as the Dismounter. So one-handed, its damage is 608. So it is, and two-handed, it is 666. Well, if that's not an Omen, I don't know, because Yes, it is stronger than the Dismounter and stronger than the Monk's Flame Blade, but unfortunately, it still just falls behind the Beastman's Cleaver. So it does. That is the only shame of this weapon. Scaling BB, oddly enough, this weapon is actually, even before being modified, it is still considered a quality weapon with a CC scaling. I just wish it was just a little bit better, to be honest. It has the standard moveset as well as a unique heavy moveset, basically the guillotine heavies. And then it's got your swap weapon art skill as our skill. Just you can swap out your weapon art for any one that you prefer. Unfortunately, it just suffers with the same thing that the Monk's Flame Blade does, as well as the Dismounter. It is just simply outclassed. In truth, here, nobody should be surprised at where it's going. It is going straight in next to its other two brothers, which one's a strength based one and one's a dexterity based one, and now we've got the quality. We have the trio in B tier, and unfortunately, again, it's just simply outclassed by the two tiers above. It's unfortunately just the way it is. Now on to the one weapon I consider a disappointment. The Zamor curved sword. Unfortunately, this weapon is a disappointment, but maybe not for the reasons you might think. Its damage is 576 one-handed, and two-handed it comes in at 621, making it the second weakest. We all know Morgotz is the weakest, but its weapon art makes it completely outclass everything else. Scaling, C in strength, and a B in dexterity, meaning it would have a higher AR on a pure dex build, possibly. After that, it's its unique move set. It has a unique move set, but standard heavy attacks. But this unique move set is slow and clunky. If they buff the speed of it, which we now know they can do, thanks to the previous patch buffing the Greatswords and the colossal weapons, if they increased this weapon's speed, it would be much more comparable to the weapons that it's being compared against, realistically. After that, it has a unique weapon art, which is a lot like the Gravitas weapon art, where it is basically a stab the ground, big boom. But the problem is it requires a little bit of baiting and playing around with. But because you are left stationary, you are quite well weak at that point. And then it has 65 points of frost buildup, which is probably its only redeeming factor. All they need to do to make this weapon better is simply increase its animation speeds. I said that in its video, and I'm going to say it again now. That is the only thing they need to do to make this weapon proper. So, considering everything that has been said, I'm pretty sure nobody at this stage is going to be surprised that it is indeed a C tier weapon. I know this is probably going to annoy an awful lot of people, but this is just personally how I feel. It is clunky and hard to use. Yes, the frost build is good, but it is just clunky to use. So it is a C tier weapon. Now on to the final and last sword. We have the Onyx Lord's Greatsword. So we do. Now, this is the second, in terms of raw AR, this is the second most powerful weapon in the curved Greatsword classification. Its damage is 698 one-handed and 751 two-handed, but it is again split damage, again split between physical and magical damage. That's a hell of an AR. Next up, we've got the scaling. Scaling comes with a B in strength, an E in dexterity, and a B in intelligence. This means this weapon on the right build could far surpass this AR, so it can far surpass the AR that it's currently on, due to the fact that tactically on a quality build you've wasted stats in dexterity, and that could do very well in intelligence, boosting that AR even more. It comes with the standard curved greatsword moveset that there's nothing to scoff at, due to the fact that it is a powerful moveset. That is still a plus, but the problem is the weapon art. You're not going to be hitting anybody with that thing ever. It is going to require dumb luck. It is basically a version of Gravitas. You're not going. I think it's called Onyx Lord's Repulsion. I think that's what it might be called. But you're not going to be hitting anybody. You are basically crippling your playstyle by using this weapon. I know that sounds unfair to the weapon, but it's saying that it's not as It's not as detrimental as I'm making it out to be. It's just the weapon art is weak. You can use it to mess with people, but your odds of hitting it are slim to heavily unlikely. Like I think in my video I hit it once. Like the AR is still nothing to laugh at. Like the AR is still beastly. But unfortunately the weapon art just lets the weapon down overall. So shockingly enough, this one actually took me a bit of time to figure out, so it did, but I did settle on putting it into B tier. The reason for this was simply the fact of, was it as powerful as the A or S tier? Definitely not. But was it as bad as the Zamor's curved sword? Again, no. Because comparing the Zamor to the Onyx Overlord, the Onyx Lord sword, it has a similar weapon art, only the Zamor has less damage and a worse moveset. So the only place it could fundamentally be was in B tier. So there we have it. There is the tiers for all of the curved great swords in the game. So it is currently. This will change as I create more builds. It takes me a while to get a build set up properly, but there we have it. There is all of the curved great swords set by tier. If you have anything that you want to say, or you think that I should change certain things, then let me know and I will do a bit of testing and figure it out, of course. But as it sits, this is not a finalized tier list, as for all we know that there is DLC to come out. As not just that there is also more builds to test and to compare. So of course weapons may change and go in different directions. We just have to wait and see. But guys, I hope you all enjoyed my tier list. I hope you enjoyed my explanation, and please like, share, and subscribe if you do indeed want to see more. And if you have any feedback for me, please let me know. And guys, I'll see you all in the next video. Goodbye.